What's up, everybody? It's George back again with Warp Charge Gaming, and I'm excited today to give you this video. It is the Nova Open 2018 Kill Teams Finals. Here in this video you are about to see. This is 4 games over the course of about 4 hours, time lapse into under an hour with me narrating exactly what happened. I've watched each battle all the way through on the back end here, transcribed everything that went down, and then accurately deliver like a book on tape exactly what happened for you for easy digestion in a quick way. So I hope you enjoy watching these videos. There's lots of other battle reports that you can watch. I've learned a lot along the way. There's certainly things that even in the tournament was missteps by both myself and the opponents, things that were missed in action. You hopefully catch them out there because that means you're paying close attention. But all in all, the games were fair, the games were awesome, and I had an amazing time. Big thank you to all the players that you see in this video. Each player I played against in the finals and throughout the event were fantastic. The judge, Ben, was an excellent host when it came to the Kill Team Pods and final event. This starts at 8:30 in the morning on Sunday, what you're seeing here. You can watch the 2 other pods that I participated in with Death Guard. There is also going to be a third that I produced for you that is with the Tau. So you can see a total of 13 matches or so and what goes down. I hope you enjoy the video. It was a lot of fun to make and a lot of fun to be there. If you've ever thought about going to the Nova Open, quit thinking about it. Make sure you do it. And I hope I get to catch you out there sometime soon. So again, enjoy the video, keep taking fun seriously. Let's get to the action. All right, guys, here you are seeing my kill team that I brought to the finals here. I had a command roster of 20 models, but did not choose to swap any of the models around as I felt this was my favorite loadout. What you're seeing here is Light King models from Age of Sigmar that I've used as counts as for my Death Guard, approved by Nova. Thank you, Nova. I think they look pretty cool. You got one leader in the center there with a plasma pistol and plague sword. And then to the sides of him, you see 2 models with holes in their belly. One is colored red. He is the demolition specialist. Both the models with the holes in their stomach, those are my gunners. They are each equipped with the Blight Launcher, which is 24-inch 2-shot assault that it does strength 6, -2, and D3 damage. And then next to them, flanking the left and right side of my leader there, is my Combat and Zealot specialist. The Zealot is in light green and the Combat is in dark green. They both are carrying the Flails of Corruption. They get 2 attacks apiece as Plague Marine fighters, the Combat getting 3 attacks innately as for being the Combat specialist, and the Zealot gets an additional attack when it charges and +1 strength. And finally, I bring 3 Poxwalkers to help me score objectives, soak up Overwatch, and to make sacrificial charges where needed. What's up, everybody? All right, so here you see the finals. We're about to see 4 matches in a row that each are about an hour-long round. That'll be time-lapsed into a much shorter amount of time with me overdubbing the results here. So in the Nova Open Kill Team Tournament package, for the finals, we played mission 1 through 4. In each of the missions, there is a total of 9 primary points that can be scored and 9 secondary points to be scored. The primary points are generally scored the same. There is a number of objectives on the board, and you get 1 point for holding 1 objective, 2 points for holding 2, and 3 if you hold more than the enemy. With the secondaries, for each mission, there is 5 universal secondaries out of a total of 12 different options that are spread about each mission, with also an additional mission-specific secondary for each mission to be chosen from. So we pick 3 out of the 6 available secondaries secretly, and we reveal them at the time of scoring. In the first mission, called Vital Supplies, there's 5 objectives down, 1 in the center, with 1 in the center of each table sector. The mission-specific secondary is one that I chose myself, called Mission Critical Supplies, where at the end of the battle round, you score an additional victory point if you hold the center objective. On top of that, I chose Called Shot and Cut Apart. Called Shot is to kill with the ready model, and Cut Apart is to kill in the fight phase. Both things that my army is pretty solid at. Being that a win-loss can be heavily weighted by who can score the most objectives throughout the game, it already makes sense that I'm going to fight over the center, so why not choose the center objective as a bonus point as well? So my first opponent is Matt Hull. He did well in the pods, of course, winning a pod and coming to the finals. He brought a special list unique to many other players, as he brought Heretic Astartes with 19 cultists and a single Chaos Space Marine gunner as a sniper specialist with a plasma gun. He also brought a heavy specialist with a heavy stubber and a demolition specialist with a flamer. On turn 1, the Heretics win the initiative, and he chooses to swarm the objective, trying to secure that point early. I'm thrilled that he does, though, because I've placed both of my fighters into the center, which gives me now ample opportunity to get them both to make the charge and back each other up. After he does his moves, fortifying the objectives and taking over the center, I go ahead and make my first action to ready both my gunners, and then I charge my combat specialists into all 4 of the cultists on the center objective. The 2 that are closest to my combat specialists that are only about 6 inches away, he chooses to retreat those and back them up a bit, which, watching on the back end, I realized how tired I was because he can't actually retreat if he already moved in the round. But I was so tired at 8:30 in the morning I didn't even notice. Again, this is Sunday, 8:30 a.m. after a lot of partying at the Nova Open weekend. But I'm still within 8 inches of the back 2 cultists that are now the closest to me. I fail with my first roll on the charge, and I go ahead and spin my command point there to re-roll the charge. This time I make it, and of course you re-roll both the dice when you re-roll a charge distance, because anytime you add the dice together that can be re-rolled with a tactical re-roll, you re-roll them both. I land the charge, and I engage the first front 2 that are in nearest proximity to the objective, and I still have access or the maneuverability to pile into the other 2 that fell back with a retreat. I then go ahead and follow up with my Zealot making a charge on the 2 cultists he has on the outer right side of the middle ruin there. And I land it with a big roll and go ahead and engage both a Flamer and another cultist he has on that middle right. I go ahead and on the left and right side of the board get my Poxwalkers within range of the objectives. And I send one up the center, not engaged in combat, just to simply fortify that objective with another body. And hopefully, if lives, gives me an option on turn 2 to be able to charge in if I need to keep that combat locked in so he can't fall back away. In the shooting phase, we both start with our ready models. He misses with his first lasgun shot. I use my blight launcher that's in the right side to target his plasma gun. I fail to hit, though, and I use my last command point reroll to get the hit, but I still fail to wound, unfortunately. I take my demolition specialist and I target the plasma gun again. I land the hit and I get the wound with a -2 AP. He fails that save, but he uses a tactical reroll since it does do D3 damage, and he manages to pass on the tactical reroll. He returns a shot into my Poxwalker on the center objective. I fail the disgustingly resilient, and he lands the 5+ in the injury, which he needed due to my obscurity, and he takes me out of action. He uses his last command point to give his sniper with the plasma to get a +1 to hit, and he overcharges it. He targets my blight launcher in the bottom right. He hits and wounds twice. I fail both my saves. I fail all 4 of the disgustingly resilience due to it doing 4 damage because of overcharged plasma. He only gets to roll 2 damage, of course, on the injury table, though, and he rolls double 1s on the injury, giving me only a flesh wound to my great relief. He then takes his last shots versus the Poxwalker by the objective in the bottom right, but he doesn't land any hits. I pile into the center with my combat specialist, and I split my 3d3 attacks amongst the cultists. I take out the first 2 that are nearest the objective, which gains control of the objective for my fighter, as well as my secondary to hold the center objective, but I whiff on the 3rd cultist, which isn't that big of a deal at this point, being I got the 2 most crucial. Next, my Zealot piles into the 2 cultists he charged in the upper right middle there. I get 7 attacks, splitting them 4 into his combat cultists and 3 into his flamer cultists. I get the taken out of action results on both the injuries results, and that leaves the Zealot unengaged after killing both of his targets. He fails to fight back with his cultists in the middle versus my combat specialist, and the center is mine. I continue to hold the objective. So at the end of the round, for the first turn, I get 1 secondary for holding the middle objective. I get another for killing something in the fight phase. And then, of course, I have 3 objectives, his 2 in the primary. So this makes the score 5-2. On turn 2, the Heretics win the initiative again. This time I declare a decisive move, and I offer him the opportunity to match. He doesn't choose to do so, and he lets it happen. I charge all the cultists around the objective in the upper right-hand side, in the upper right ruin of the board. On the Overwatch, he manages to get a wound through, but I get my 3+ save. I roll a 7 on the charge, and with Nurgle's Blessing, I run right into the center of those 4 cultists on the top right objective. He goes ahead and resumes his move now and falls back from my combat specialist, goes ahead and scoots the 2 cultists that were engaged with my combat specialist to the outer edges of the ruin that still managed to be within 2 inches of the center of the objective, and we agree that he is outscoring me there with 2 bodies to my 1. He advances some cultists to the windows of the bottom left ruin, preparing to target my friends inside on the objective. I fortify the objective in the bottom left, preparing for him to get some shooting there that he's lined up. I put a poxwalker, my demolition specialist, and a leader in there to make sure that I'm able to hold it. I reposition my poxwalker and gunner on the bottom right corner to make sure I hold the objective with both models in case he's able to shoot one of them off in the shooting phase. I fall back my combat specialist in the center as well to hide out of line of sight from as many guns on the left and right as I can while being in the range of the objective skill. Of course, I can only fall back, ready, or remain stationary due to him starting the movement phase within 1 inch of an enemy model. A rule that is easily overlooked as I did myself for many games. Even if you're falling back from, you can only still fall back yourself in that movement phase. So in the shooting phase, he shoots with all his ready models and he takes out the poxwalker in the bottom left corner of the board. I return fire with my leader, shooting his plasma pistol into the unobscured cultist in the center. I have to kill one of these 2 cultists in the center in order to contest the center, and I really need to kill both so I can end up controlling it. I get the hit with my plasma pistol and I get the wound on a 2+, because it's a strength 7 weapon on his toughness 3. I get a 2 on the injury, and which would only be a flesh wound. I use my last command point, being I only have 1 left that are doing the decisive move in the beginning of the round, but I still, with the reroll, only land a flesh wound. He fails his next shot, and then so I go ahead and shoot my demolition specialist into the cultist I just gave a flesh wound to. I only land 1 damage on the D3 damage result, but I still managed to get the out of action roll a little bit easier this time due to him having a flesh wound. With my other blight launcher, I fired his cultist on the right-hand side of the objective, trying to take them both out to give me that score of the center there. But due to him being obscured, on the injury table I needed a 5 and I only land a flesh wound. Next we move to combat, and with my zealot engaged with the 4 cultists in the top right, I spread my 3d3 attacks versus 3 out of the 4 cultists, choosing to leave the one in the corner of the ruin so that I can consolidate into him and trap him in that corner with nowhere to be able to fall back to. That way it guarantees my fighter can't be shot on the next turn, and I'll still be contesting the objective. I managed to take out the 3 cultists that I go up against, and I consolidate into the one that's remaining into the corner of that objective, or ruin, in the top right. This turn he lost so many bodies that the cultist I was unable to kill in the middle center there contesting the objective, he has a flesh wound, and he's going to need a 1 to be able to pass the shaken test. Unfortunately, he rolls a 2 and shakes, which actually gives me control of the objective after all. So then I'm able to score 3 primary points, and he's only able to score 1, and I was able to get my secondary cut apart for killing in the fight phase, as well as controlling the center, another bonus point. This brings the score to 8-3 in my favor. On turn 3, the Heretics win the initiative again, and this time I do not do a decisive move. Due to him having the shaken cultist right next to my combat specialist in the center objective, I know that if worse come to worse, I have an easy charge in my movement to be able to avoid being shot at and still contest the objective, with also an easy kill to be able to get for my cut apart. So I do not use a command point to override the movement phase there and let him take his moves. He advances 2 of his cultists to the center objective and spreads them out to both be in range of the objective but not close enough to engage them with just the 1 combat specialist in the center. He drops his fighters from the rooftop of the top right ruin there and puts more bodies on that objective, which I will not be able to charge because I'm engaged with that trapped cultist in the corner. He puts a few more bodies into the center where he can there to try to hold it with more of his model counts. I opt to charge 2 of the cultists that are on the deepest part of the ruin there, and I make it, of course, because they're only inches away. I ready my 2 blight launchers and my leader to shoot. Into the shooting, he fails with his first readied shot. I shoot my demolition specialist into the cultist within the objective on the lower side of the center objective. I get the wound and the out of action on the injury roll, which gets me my called shot secondary for killing with a ready model. I then shoot my leader into the cultist in the ruin in the upper left, but unfortunately to no avail. I then target the shaking cultist so it doesn't auto-pass with gritted teeth at the end of the round and end up contesting the center objective after all. I land the hit and the wound, and then I do 3 damage with the D3 result from the blight launcher. This gives me an easy opportunity to land the 3+ I needed to take it out of action. Now the center is only contested by the 2 engaged cultists with my combat specialists. He fires back with his plasma against my gunner, and lands the hit in the wound, and I fail my saves, and he actually takes my gunner out of action. He also fires his heavy stubber at my poxwalker on the ruin in the bottom right, but luckily he fails with that and a few more other shots, still giving me the ability to score that objective, even though he took out my gunner. My zealot, engaged with the corner cultist in the upper right, goes ahead and removes him in the fight phase. My combat specialist in the middle kills his 2 targets as well. This gets me my cut apart, of course. I'm still able to hold the center, giving me another point for holding the center. I hold 3 objectives to his 2 and gets me an additional 3 more points. And this makes the score going into turn 4 13-5 in my favor. On turn 4, I win the initiative with the Death Guard, and I choose to first charge the heretics around the upper right objective, engaging as many as I can with the zealot over there. He overcharges his plasma and rapid fire overwatches. He gets the hit, he lands the wound, and I fail my saves, even with the tactical reroll, and he lands the 4, takes me out of action. Luckily by this moment, not that big of a deal, but he did get me in that overwatch. Next, I charge my combat specialist in the center ruins into his cultist on the objective in the upper left corner. He chooses to retreat, and I don't even bother to take any of my failed charge distance, as I'd rather just stay on the center at that point after nullifying a few shots. I ready my demolition specialist and my leader. He advances his cultist to contest my poxwalker at the objective in the bottom right. I take a shot with my demo specialist, and I land the hit and the wound, but I only do 1 damage on the D3 damage result. I roll a 3 for just a flesh wound. I then shoot my pistol into the now flesh-wounded cultist, but I fail to hit. He uses a command point for an extra shot on his heavy specialist, using the heavy stubber. He only gets 1 of the hits though, but he lands the wound. Unfortunately for him though, I get my disgustingly resilient. He then fires his plasma overcharge next. He only gets 1 hit, and then unfortunately fails to wound on a 1. With the rest of his shots, he fails to hit or to wound, and the battle ends up concluding. The battle goes 13-5 in my favor, with no further points gained on the final round. By being the aggressor, a strong offense was a good defense in this case, and I was able to keep his bodies at bay from being able to overwhelm the objectives. In Game 2, I'm going against Dwayne, bringing his 1,000 Suns to the table. I haven't had much opportunity to face off against the 1,000 Suns, even though I'm aware of their tricks, so I'm definitely a bit nervous going into this one. On the first turn, the Death Guard win the initiative. This is the second mission of the packet called Pivotal Point. It is a search and destroy style deployment zone where we each have a table quarter diagonal from one another. There's a 12-inch circle in the middle of the table, making about a 6-inch half circle on both of our sides. In the Pivotal Point mission, there are 6 objectives with the same kind of primary as usual. Score 1 for scoring 1, 2 for scoring 2, and 3 if you hold more. And then, of course, the usual, picking 3 of the 5 secondaries and potentially opting to choose the mission-specific one called Sector Cleared. Sector Cleared, the mission-specific secondary in this one is to have 2 table quarters completely empty of enemy models. In this mission, I ended up choosing Hammering, where you do 3 injury rolls in the fight phase. Prey on the Weak to kill a model with a flesh wound, and Headlong Assault, attempting to make 3 charges in a given round. On turn 1, the Death Guard win the initiative. I advance my first Poxwalker towards the upper right objective, but I don't get enough distance to make it within range. I then advance my Zealot, and I get enough to be within 2 inches of the center of the objective in the top right corner, but still able to hide behind the wall out of line of sight, so I'm now scoring but safe from shooting. My Poxwalker that's in the bottom center gets a 6 on the advance, getting a 10-inch move, and I go over to the objective on the far left, gaining control. I advance my Combat Specialist, but I only get a 1 on the roll, and I just move 6 inches to the left. I make sure to keep my Poxwalker as the closest enemy model, thinking about Cloud of Flies or even his Psychic, coming from his Aspiring Sorcerer in the top left. I then go ahead and ready both my gunners. I advance my Poxwalker and get a nice long bomb over to the objective in the top right. His movement, he then charges my Poxwalkers in the upper right with a Zangor, but he fails to charge with a 5. He goes ahead and re-rolls it with a command point, and he fails again. He scoots his Aspiring Sorcerer to the window of the upper left ruin to get line of sight. He targets my Poxwalker and Combat Specialist for a charge with a Zangor in the upper left, and this time he makes the charge. He tries to make another charge with a Zangor, but he fails the reroll. So he has now my Combat Specialist engaged. In the Psychic, I pull out the laser to show him that my Poxwalker on the objective in the left-hand side, his head is actually visible to the Psyker, making him the closest visible enemy and must be the target of his psychic power. He gets the power off, but he only rolls a 4 in the injury table, which is reduced to a 3 thanks to my obscurity. In the shooting, I then start with my ready model and I shoot my demolition specialist to his leader. I land a single 5+ to hit, and I manage to get the wound off. He rolls and fails his save, and I manage to get 3 damage on the D3 damage result for the Blight Launcher, which to my surprise and joy, I land a 5+ on the injury, and I kill his leader as well as a Psyker in my very first shot. He then shoots at me with his ready gunner using a Soul Reaper. He fails to wound, but he uses a command point to re-roll, and he gets the wound off after all with a -3 AP. I need a 6+ to save it, and a little insult to injury after killing his leader, I nail the 6+, and I am just fine. I then fire my other Blight Launcher at the Zangor, but I fail to hit, leaving me with no other shots. He then shoots his Flamer on the far left middle there at my Poxwalkers on the right side of the board on the objective. He only gets 1 shot out of D6 though, and I managed to pass my Disgustingly Resilient, so far going great for the Death Guard. He then shoots with another Flamer from the middle, this time getting 4 shots, and he splits the shots 2 and 2 between my 2 Poxwalkers on the upper right objective. He wounds the first, and I fail my Disgusting, and he gets the kill in the injury roll with a 6. For the second Poxwalker he wounds, I fail my Disgusting, but this time he only caused a flesh wound. As soon as I saw him spend 1 command point to reroll the charge earlier in the movement, I knew not to use my Cloud of Flies after all to save my two command points to override combat with the Zangor that charged my combat specialist. So at the start of the fight phase, that's exactly what I did. I used my Decisive Strike to fight first against the Zangor, getting 3d3 attacks. I get 2 hits out of my rolls and 2 wounds. He takes his invulnerable saves, but still get 1 through. The weapon does 2 damage, but even though I rolled 2 dice on the injury table, only needing a 4, I whiff with no command points left, and I just get a flesh wound. He then fights back with his Zangor, but he misses, now being -1 to hit due to the flesh wound, which was good for me. In the morale phase, my Poxwalker that had gained a flesh wound in the far left, he ends up shaking and losing the objective after all. But my flesh wounded Poxwalker does not shake in the upper right, and I still managed to hold 3 objectives to his 1 and score 3 points for holding more to his 2. Neither of us scored any secondaries in the first round. On round 2, the Death Guard win the initiative again. I decide to fall back from a Zangor that is engaged with my combat specialist to fortify the objective on the left and try to leave it stuck in the open to be able to take it out with shooting. I charge my Poxwalker in the upper right to his Zangor, but I fail to charge. I decide to continue to hold the objective with my Zealot in the upper right-hand side, out of line of sight but scoring through the wall. He retaliates hidden Zealot, scoring that objective by advancing a Flamer all the way to the other side of the ruin there to be able to get a shot with his Assault Flamer on my Zealot. He had to make a choice to either score the objective or to get within range of the shot, and he chose to do the shooting instead. So currently still holding the objective, but life is threatened. Next, he then goes ahead and charges my Poxwalker to engage it with a Zangor in the upper right there. He failed the charge on the first roll, but he used a command point to re-roll it and make it this time. On the Zangor that I fell back from, he decides to also fall back to the objective on the left-hand side. At the end of the movement, this time I play Cloud of Flies on my combat specialist on the objective in the far left who fell back, and make it so that he has to target the shaken Poxwalker before he can target my specialist on the objective. I then take a long shot towards his Soul Reaper with my Demo Specialist. Unfortunately, I fail my 2 shots. He responds by shooting his Soul Reaper back at my Dark Demo Specialist. I fail my saves and my Disgustings, but due to my obscurity, he needs a 5 on the injury, and he only gets a flesh wound. I choose my other Blight Launcher at the Zangor that fell back with a flesh wound, and I get the wound. I do 2 damage on the D3, and I get the kill, giving me a Prey on the Weak secondary for killing something with a flesh wound. This completes all my shots. He then flames my Zealot on the other side of the wall with his -2 Flamer. I fail both my saves and Disgustings. He needs a 5 to kill due to the obscurity on my Zealot, but he only lands a flesh wound. He then shoots at my shaken Poxwalker, and due to my obscurity, I get lucky and he causes a second flesh wound. We then move to the fight phase, and he fights with his Zangor versus my Poxwalker in the top right there. He lands the wound, I fail the Disgusting, and he gets the kill in the injury roll. In the morale phase, my Poxwalker on the left objective continues to remain shaken, but I'm still able to score the objective from my combat specialist that fell back to it. Then, unfortunately, my Zealot in the top right that just survived his Flamer shakes on the morale phase there and gets no actions to be had for the next round. What really is the bummer, though, is then I have to roll a shaken test on my wounded Demo Specialist holding the objective in the middle center. I shake with him on a 6, So now we both hold 2 objectives, and we both get 2 on the primary. This puts the score 6-5 in my favor. On turn 3, the Thousand Suns win the initiative. I play decisive move and I charge my combat specialist into his flamer on the other side of the ruins. I fail my saves and my disgustings against his overwatch, and I'm scared shitless at this point, but he just gets a flesh wound due to me charging from obscurity. I fail my charge on the first roll there, again being just terrified. I use my last command point and I manage to make the charge with 11. He goes ahead and resumes his movement after my decisive move. In the movement, I scoop my blight launcher over to be able to get line of sight on the flamer that's aiming towards my zealot on the other side of that wall, who is shaken up in the right corner. In the shooting, he goes ahead and targets my blight launcher that I move to see his flamer. He lands the wound and I fail my saves, but luckily he only gets a flesh wound. I go ahead and shoot my ready leader into the Zangor in the upper right. I fail from a long shot and obscurity. He then flames my zealot again with this time getting 5 shots on the D6 result. He lands 2 wounds at -2 AP. I fail my saves and he gets it taken out of action. That shaken result that last round cost me big and gets him prey on the weak as well for killing a model with a flesh wound. I then shoot the Zangor on the objective in the top right using my gunner that I moved into position. I did this because he was in the open and I wanted a better chance to get the kill. Despite landing the wound though, I only put a flesh wound on him. We then go into combat. My specialist against the flamer that I charged around the corner of the ruin on the far left side get 8 attacks with his 3d3 result, and I give the Marine 7 saves to make at -2. I get him through, of course, and I roll 2 damage on the injury table, but I roll double 1s and I just cause a flesh wound to my sadness. He fights back, he gets a hit and he wounds, but I make my armor save. I would have been real upset had he got a kill there with that guy. We then, at the end of round 3, both have to take broken test. I pass with an 8 due to my leader still being alive, but he fails his highest leadership on the board and breaks. So all his models now need to take nerve test. He does all right, and he only has 1 model shake from the test that is in a position that isn't that big of a deal to him. My blight launcher in the right corner doesn't shake, thank goodness, but my demo specialist in the middle does again on another 6. Had I not shook on either the Poxwalker in the left-hand ruin there, or I unshook on the demo specialist in the middle, I would have had more objectives and scored 3 on the primary. Instead, though, we both only score 1. Because of my shaken models on the left and him rolling his shaken test and passing, he managed sector cleared for having 2 quarters on the upper half of the board uncontested, and he gets another secondary. Now that puts the score 7-8 in the Thousand Suns' favor going into round 4. I was set up for success at the end of that turn, but due to the 6 on the nerve test, it put me down and gave him the edge by 1 point. So we go into the final turn with Thousand Suns having a 1-point lead. On the final turn, Death Guard wins the initiative with a double 6. I advance my leader and I roll a 6. I get him over to the objective with my demo gunner, who is currently shaken, to try to help ensure holding that center objective, leaving my flesh-wounded gunner behind to hold the one on the right. I go ahead and ready that gunner. I think about falling back my combat specialist from where I'm engaged on the left side of the board with his flamer, but I can't make it to the objective if I fall back. And if I fall back, then he'll be able to shoot his flamer freely. I decide to stay engaged since I can't make it to either objective, and make it so that at least that if he falls back, he can't shoot. He does choose to fall back and challenge the objective on the left-hand side of the board through the ruins wall. He then positions to hold the upper left objective as well. He advances Marine in the upper half to shoot his flamer through the window. I shoot my ready gunner at the Zangor on the objective in the upper right because in the open, I'm able to get the wound through and do 2 damage on the D3 roll. I then get the taken out of action, which gets me another prey on the weak. He then takes his flamer in the upper right and shoots through the window at my gunner. He only gets 1 shot on the D6 result though, and fails to get the wound off. He spends his last command point to re-roll the wound, but still doesn't manage it. He then targets my leader, who is in the open in the center from the upper left corner of the board with his Soul Reaper, but I managed to get the save on the Disgusting and bypass the damage. In the morale phase, I use one of my command points to auto-pass with my Poxwalker on the far left and deny him scoring that objective, by us both being contested. I don't break on the broken test again. He already has and has to do nerve tests for everyone. He then rolls a 6 and breaks on the model contesting the objective on the left ruin there, which gives me the objective. He passes and fails a couple more, but ends up holding 2 objectives to my 3, which gives me 3 to his 2 points, making me up by 1 point. But he has sector cleared secondary and we tie. So then the tiebreaker goes down to who holds the most objectives, which is me. But I have one more nerve test to take. I owe him a nerve test for the flesh-wounded gunner in the bottom right. So this is where it all comes down to, this one shaken test to decide if I have more objectives or not and be a tiebreaker. I roll a 6 and I shake. I use my last command point to re-roll and I get a 6 again, which means that I only scored 2 objectives and getting me 2 points, giving him a 1-point lead and victory, 11-10. A crazy game. Dwayne was a great player, and it came down to a die roll. I feel like I played it very properly, and the dice betrayed me on the end there on the shaken test. So it was a fantastic game, and I couldn't ask for a better way to lose. All right, next you're seeing game 3 here. This is Ruin by Ruins in the Nova Open Kill Team packet. Same kind of story with the primaries. There's a max of 9 throughout the game, and of course a max of 9 points to be scored with the secondaries. There's a total of 6 secondaries, 1 being mission specific. Otherwise, though, the objectives in this mission are actually the ruins themselves. There's 5 separate ruins there that count for scoring, 1 in the center and 1 in each table quarter. To hold the ruin, you have to have the most wound count within inside of it. In this game, it is a mirror match of Death Guard versus Death Guard. I'm fighting against Eric, who actually fought earlier in the weekend in one of the pods, and this is our rematch. Going into the match, I am now a 1-1 record for the finals, while Eric has won 2 of his matches so far. So here we go with a little bit of intimidation on my side. My opponent gets the initiative on the first turn. He advances Poxwalker to the center, follows it up with 2 more Poxwalkers, making a barrier that he then places his combat specialist with a Flail of Corruption behind. So now his combat specialist is unchargeable without getting through the Poxwalkers first. He then fortifies the other ruins that he can. For my first move, I go ahead and attempt to make a 9-inch charge with my Zealot into the center of the middle ruin. I fail the charge with only a 4, and I just take my distance. I then charge my combat specialist, and I fail with an 8 when I needed 9. I go ahead and take the movement and move into the center ruin there, also being another body within. Also join the center ruin there and fortify my position with a Poxwalker. I move my Demo Specialist into the bottom right ruin to help fortify that position. And then I move a Poxwalker into the bottom left ruin, and I go ahead and put my Gunner in there as well to try to hold that. At the end of the movement phase, we both play Cloud of Flies. I play it on my Zealot that only made the 4-inch charge distance in the middle of the board, and he plays on his combat specialist, so neither of us can shoot at our critical fighters there. In the shooting phase, he actually opts to pass on all his shooting due to choosing the mission-specific secondary called Swift and Subtle, where if he makes no shots for the round, he can get a secondary point. I choose to use my gunner with a Blight Launcher in the left-hand ruin to shoot at his gunner in the top left ruin. Could have targeted his leader in this instance, but his gunner was within half range, so I chose to take the better odds to hit. I managed to get a hit and the wound, and he fails to save, and my Blight Launcher causes 2 damage on the D3 damage result. I roll the 2 dice on the injury table, looking for 5s due to his obscurity, and I hit it with a big 6 and take him out of action. I then, with my Demo Specialist on the right side of the board, target his Plasma Gun in the upper right ruin, but I fail to hit. At the end of the turn, he scores 3 for having the middle and 2 of his home ruins, and I only score 2. And then he additionally gets Proximity Alert for having 2 of his models within 1 inch of one of my models, and an additional point for not shooting. So he brings a score of 5-2 at the end of turn 1. Going into turn 2, the opponent wins the initiative once more. This time I play Decisive Move, and I charge all 3 of the Poxwalkers in front of me in the center ruin to keep his Flail of Corruption trapped behind the Poxwalker wall. By being the first to charge, they basically get no movement at that point, and they have to remain in that wall-style formation, making his Flail of Corruption have to sit there and watch them suffer. Then resumes his movement and moves his leader into a better obscurity on the left-hand side there in the ruin, and he readies his Plasma and Bolter in the upper right-hand corner. I go ahead and follow up and charge my Zealot into the Poxwalker combat, and I target his combat specialist as well, just in case I make it through the Poxwalkers there and able to fight against it. I advance my Poxwalker directly into his face on the gunners in the right-hand side. I want to try to make it so that he has to target that Poxwalker instead of one of my more vital shooters if he doesn't want it to be contesting that objective at the end of the round. I go ahead and ready my Demolition Gunner, and my leader moves into the corner of the ruin to go ahead and help fortify as well. This turn, he does choose to shoot, and he shoots his Plasma at the Poxwalker, but fortunately for me, he whiffs. I then shoot my demo specialist at the bolter that he has over there so that to try to remove that shot before he gets a chance to shoot it. I get the hit, but on the wound roll, I roll double ones and I fail. He then shoots my Poxwalker rapid fire range with the bolter he has there. He wounds the Poxwalker. I fail my disgusting, and he gets just a flesh wound. He decides to re-roll that flesh wound with one of his command points, and he gets a 4, killing the Poxwalker. I then shoot my gunner on the left side of the board into his leader this time, and I land the hit and the wound, but I only do 1 damage on the D3 result. But then, after he fails it disgusting, I land a big 6 on the single injury roll, and I take his leader out of action. A big kill on the second turn. Because I was not able to engage his combat specialist in the center ruin there, he goes ahead and throws a grenade at the Poxwalker that I advanced into the middle. He does D6 shots with the grenade, but he only gets 1. He then gets a hit and gets the wound. I fail my disgusting, but he still just gets a flesh wound due to the obscurity that I had. I shoot with my plasma pistol for my leader at his gunner in the top right ruin. I get the hit, but I fail to wound. I use my last command point and try to wound on a reroll, and this time I land it with a -3 AP. It goes through, but then he saves his disgusting resilient. In the fight phase, I pile in with my combat specialist. I get only 3 attacks out of the 3d3 attacks. I put 2 into one of the Poxwalkers and 1 into the other. I whiff my attacks on one of them, and I only get a flesh wound on the other, even though I was rolling 2 dice on the injury roll. So I then follow up and pile in with my Zealot. This time I get 7 total attacks from the 3d3 attacks, and I put 4 into one of the Poxwalkers and 3 into the other. I get the kill against the flesh-wounded Poxwalker that I would cause by my combat specialist, which gives me my secondary prey on the weak for killing a model with a flesh wound. And then I kill the second model I put my attacks into. He fights back with a 1 Poxwalker that remains, but he doesn't land anything. At the end of turn 2, I have more ruins this time than he does because I killed his leader in the top left, leaving that ruin open. I outnumbered him in the center, which gave me that objective as well, making it 3 to me and only 1 to him. We both get proximity alert this time. The score moves 8 to 7 in my favor going into turn 3. On the third turn, the opponent wins the initiative again. I do another decisive move, and I charge my combat specialist that's left over from that center combat into his Poxwalker and his combat specialist that he had left remaining. I make it in without any issue. He then goes ahead and readies both of his gunners in the top right ruin. I resume my movement, and I advance my Poxwalker in the bottom left towards the upper left ruin. I don't make it all the way, but I follow up with my gunner who makes the distance. He chooses to pass his shooting this round again in order to get that secondary for not shooting at all. I shoot with my demo specialist at his plasma gunner. I land a hit and a wound, but he managed to get the 5+ save. I shoot my plasma pistol overcharge this time, but I failed a hit, and I was too nervous to reroll the hit with a command point. In combat, he uses his last 2 command points to do a decisive strike and fight first with his combat specialist versus mine. He gets 8 attacks and splits them 4 and 4 between my 2 specialists. On the first target, he gets 3 wounds through, and I only save 1 and end up taking 2 of the wounds, which that means 4 disgustings because they do 2 damage apiece. I fail, and he rolls the 2 damage on the injury table, and he gets the kill, taking me out of action. On the second target that he had chosen, he gets an additional 4 more attacks. He only gets 2 out of the 4 hits this time. He gets the wounds through, but I nail both of my 5+ armor saves, giving me a chance to fight back. I then retaliate and get 6 D3 attacks that I pour into his flail with vengeance. I give him 4 saves to make, and he only makes 1, which means he had to take 6 disgustings. He failed them. I roll my 2 damage on the injury table, and I get double 3s on the injury, causing just a flesh wound. I go ahead and throw a command point down and re-roll one of the dice, and I get a 3 again, still just causing a flesh wound. It kind of comes back in my favor, though, because in the morale, he has to take a shaken test on the flesh-wounded model, and he actually fails that, and his combat specialist becomes shaken, which actually gives me the center objective, and now I have 3 ruins to his 1, so I get 3 primary to his 1 point. We both get proximity alert again, and he gets a point for not shooting in the round. This brings the score 12-9 in my favor going into the final turn. On the final turn, he only has 1 command point to my 2 for me killing his leader in the previous round, and he wins the initiative again. This time he simply readies his gunner in the upper right, and I ready my gunners. He chooses to pass on his shooting again, try to get that final secondary point for not shooting. I target his plasma gunner, and I get a wound with the blight launcher. I get it through and do 2 damage on the D3 damage result, and then I land a 5 that takes him out of action, which gives me a called shot for killing with a ready model. I then kill the other gunner in the top right with my plasma pistol with a lucky extra shot from my leader. A little insult to injury there. In combat, with my 2 command points to his 1, I then override combat with a decisive strike, and I fight first, being that he had the initiative. I wanted to do that. I only get 2 wounds through after he makes his saves, but I still manage to get the kill on the injury table, and I take his fighter out of action, getting another prey on the weak. This ends the game 15-11. Another great match versus Eric. We had a great time and a lot of laughs. He's a really enjoyable player to play against. In the final game, it is a mirror match again, Death Guard versus Death Guard. This is a pretty funny one for me because Chris is who I'm up against, and I actually fought Chris in the very first game of the whole event on Thursday morning. And now I'm going to end the event by fighting Chris again with a rematch. Funny enough, we both choose the exact same secondary secretly. It definitely made the most sense for us. We both chose Obliteration, which is to kill something with a multi-damage weapon, Cut Apart to kill in the fight phase, and then the mission-specific objective, which is to choose a model that is within range of an objective and do no action with that model. Now, you must declare it at the beginning of the round. In each of the rounds, we both choose a Poxwalker to do that in the center line of the board there. This mission is called Raised Archive. In this mission, there is 4 objectives placed in kind of a cross pattern, and the same kind of primaries as typical. Score 1 for 1, score 2 for 2, and hold more than your opponent for 3. So let's get into it. On the first turn there, he wins the initiative, and Chris takes his regular Plague Marine and Poxwalker and moves up towards the far middle center objective. He advances his Plague Spewer to the objective in the bottom middle, out in the open. He advances his Combat Specialist with a Flail up to the center, but hiding out of line of sight. We both choose the mission special secondary to choose a model that does nothing for the round in range of an objective to score. We both choose a Poxwalker and declare this at the start of the round. You can see those in the middle of the board there. In my move, I am outside of 9 inches, but within 10 for my Poxwalker to charge his Plague Spewer in the bottom center. I need a 9 to make the charge, but I fail the distance. I decide to barely scoot so that I do not get within 9 inches of his flamer and give him an ability to shoot me in the shooting phase. I go ahead and ready my gunner with the Blight Launcher that has a clear shot at the spewer. I also ready my Demolition Specialist. I move my leader to the upper right ruin, seeing a few of the models in the upper lane with his plasma pistol through the window. I attempt to advance my Poxwalker to reach the upper middle objective and take control, but I fail the advance. Then here comes the funny part, is that I'm within 11 inches of his Combat Specialist from where he moved up to the center. I said, hey, might as well go for it, and I nail an 11 and make the charge. I then go ahead and say why not and charge with my Zealot as well. I only roll a 9 on the charge, and I just take a partial part of the movement to move up closer but still hide out of line of sight. In the shooting, he had no ready models, so I go ahead and fire mine first. I fire my gunner that has a clear shot to his spewer. I land a hit and then the wound. He needs a 5+ save, and he nails the 6. I then go ahead and follow up and shoot my Demolition Specialist at the spewer, this time needing 5s to hit. I get a hit and I get a wound. This time he fails the save, and I get a 3 on the D3 damage. He fails the Disgustings, and I roll 3 on the injury table. I land the 5 I needed due to his obscurity, and I take him out of action. He then shoots at my leader with his bolt gun, getting 2 hits but failing to wound, because of course he needed 5s. I shoot my pistol but not overcharged, and I fail to hit. He then shoots his gunner in the far left and fails to hit as well. He shoots his Blight Launcher, and he hits and wounds my Demolition Specialist. I fail the saves, and he takes me out of action. So a little tit for tat there. I took his Spear, he took my Demolition Specialist. We both save our command points all turn, knowing very well that when combat comes, we're going to try to override each other. Indeed, when we get to the time for the fight phase, he declares Decisive Strike. I match him, and we roll off. I get 6 to his 5, and I get to swing first anyways. Feeling real good about that. I get 7 attacks out of the 3d3 attacks, and he has to make 4 saves once I get my wounds through. They make it through. I just need a 4 to kill him, but I fail to get the kill on the 2 dice rolls I rolled on the injury table, and I cause just a flesh wound. There's no tactical rerolls here because I've used both to do the Decisive Strike. So even though I made my 11-inch charge, even though I beat him in the Decisive Strike, I still only caused a flesh wound, and he gets to swing back. He gets 5 attacks on his 3d3 attacks with his Flail of Corruption. He ignores the -1 to hit from the flesh wound because of his transhuman physiology, and he gets the wound through. I fail my saves, and he gets the out of action, and holy shit, he takes me out. But at the end of the round, we both get Obliteration for killing with a multi-damage weapon, mine coming from shooting, his coming from combat. He gets Cut Apart for killing in the fight phase, so he ends up scoring 3, and I score 2 of my secondaries. We both score only 1 objective, so we get 1 primary each. So the score is 4-3 in his favor going into turn 2. On turn 2, this time I get the initiative. We both select the Poxwalker again in the middle to control the objectives and do nothing else for the secondary bonus point of the mission. I choose to charge his combat specialist again with my Zealot this time, who's sitting mid-board. He retreats back, making it need an 8. He decides he doesn't think he can try to do that again. I try to make the charge, and what do you know? I land it. And here comes my Zealot for a little bit of vengeance. I choose to fortify the objective in the bottom left that I just killed his spewer from with my gunner. I decided not risk him killing my Poxwalker on the objective, and I advance to help. I choose to fortify the objective with my gunner. He moves his model on the objective in the upper middle. I shoot my leader's pistol into him through the window in the upper right, but I fail to hit. He shoots his blight launcher into my Poxwalker on the middle objective. He gets the wound and takes it out of action. He then shoots his plasma gun at my leader and overcharges, but fails to hit. I shoot my gunner at his blight launcher, and I try to remove it from that objective besides the Poxwalker. I get the wound through. I do 2 damage on the D3 damage result. He wasn't obscured, so I need a 4, and I land the kill. So again, a little back and forth there. He shoots his bolt gun at my leader again, this time with rapid fire. He gets a hit and the wound, but I'm able to land my 3+ save. Now here we go again, another fight phase where I made a crazy long charge. It's time to do a decisive strike roll-off once again. I get a 10, I win the roll-off again. I get 7 attacks this time on my 3d3 attacks. I land 6 hits with an overall of 5 wounds. They go through naturally enough. I roll 2 on the injury table, needing a 3 because he has a flesh wound this time. And I roll a 1 and 2 and scream in agony. Another flesh wound. He gets to swing back. He gets 3 hits, and then he wounds. I fail all my saves, and he takes me out of action again, killing both of my combat and zealot specialists. I go charging that same guy, winning the charges, winning the roll-offs, and still causing flesh wounds with him retaliating back and killing me. So that was wild. Our Poxwalkers were engaged in that top middle objective, and we kind of slap at each other, causing no wounds, but I am in range to contest the objective. At the end of turn 2, he passes the nerve checks on his flesh wounded models, but he gets 3 primaries and I only get 1. He also gets all 3 of his secondaries as well. I only get 2 because I did not kill in the fight phase. The score goes to 6-10 in his favor. On turn 3, I receive the initiative again. We both declare our Poxwalkers holding the center objective again to get that final secondary. And we both just ready across the board. I shoot my blight launcher into his marine that's near the top center objective. I get 2 hits, but only 1 wound. I need this to happen, so I go ahead and roll the second failed wound, and I land that as well. He passes and fails 1, so I was glad I did it, and I get 2 on the D3 damage result for the blight launcher. I then was able to land the out of action on the injury table there. That gives me a secondary for killing with a multi-damage weapon, and this also makes it so our Poxwalker on Poxwalker combat is now the only models contesting in the upper middle center. Shoots his plasma overcharged back at my leader. He hits and wounds and kills my leader, getting his own kill with multi-damage. So now he's maxed out on obliteration. When the combat hits, he decides to fight first with his Poxwalker and spends 2 command points with a decisive strike. Because if I get that kill, his Poxwalker will actually score the objective. Gets the hit and the wound, but I actually get my disgusting save, and we remain locked. At the end of round 3, I have to take a break check, but I actually pass. He doesn't shake anywhere. We only score 1 primary each at the end of this round, and 2 secondaries each for a tie round. This makes the score 9-13 in his favor. On the final round, I win the initiative. My only chance is to score more objectives than he has, while he's scoring no points. Try to advance my gunner to the middle center, but I only roll a 3. It's so clutch that I get to that objective, I go ahead and use a command point trying to get a 5+ on the advance. I roll another 3. Now, my only chance is to be able to gain the objective in the top center middle, somehow, some way. In his move, he decides to advance his Poxwalker away from the objective that he holds in the bottom center, or in his deployment zone there. I think his thinking was that we maxed out the secondary for scoring with our Poxwalker, so he stopped concentrating on the fact that he required that objective still. This is a clutch decision that he makes that is going to help me out, as you're about to see. He fell back his Poxwalker for mine so that we weren't fighting up in the upper middle there, and so that he could take shots at my Poxwalker that remains just standing there. This gave me the ability also, though, to shoot at his Poxwalker that he fell back with on the objective with my gunner that advanced to the center of the board. He then takes his combat specialist and attempts to charge my Poxwalker that he fell back from so that he can get another body on that objective. He needs an 8, but does not get the distance. He uses a command point, and he fails the re-roll charge on double ones. This is another good move, another good situation in my favor. In the shooting, he shoots my Poxwalker with the overcharged plasma, and this time he lands the hit and the wound, and he wipes me off the objective, now holding the objective with his 1 Poxwalker. I then shoot the Poxwalker with my gun. If I kill him off the objective, it's a real big deal. Of course, I'm -1 to hit for advancing. I'm able to get lucky, though, and I land a hit and the wound, and I remove him from the objective as well, leaving it empty from any models holding it. At the end of the round, I then score 3 because he moved off that objective with his Poxwalker, which brings it to a tie score. He would have been able to get... At first, we thought that he had won, but he had accidentally added a point to his secondaries when he had already maxed out Obliteration, so he scored no points in the final round. Had he left his Poxwalker on that objective, he could have won with that single point it would have earned him. We end up with a tie, and the tiebreaker is broke by the player that holds the most objectives. This is me. But before the game can be called mine, I have to take 1 more broken check. And if I break, the Poxwalker holding the objective will have to take a nerve check. Much scared feelings in my heart. I roll the dice, and bam, I land it with a 7. Nurgle's blessing is bestowed, and this gives me 2nd for the tournament overall. At this time, I was in 1st place, and I look over and watch the remainder of Elliot's game, where if he wins or loses determines the outcome of the tournament. If he had lost, I could have taken home 1st, but he ultimately pulled it out and claims total victory, giving me 2nd for the tournament. What an amazing time. All right, everybody, so that was the tournament. I hope that you enjoyed watching this. If you haven't seen the pods, go back and check them out. I really appreciate you getting this far through the video, and if you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and hit the subscribe on our Warp Charge Gaming YouTube channel. Hit the little bell for the notifications so you can see when we go live. We do it all the time and play multiple game systems, particularly 40K and kill teams, with a little bit of Shadespire and maybe some Age of Sigmar coming, and who knows what else. It's been a journey, and we continue for a lot more ahead, and I hope you take along the ride with us. So thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe. Participate in the giveaways that we do almost every month, and I appreciate you, and thank you very much for watching. So keep taking fun seriously. Catch you next time. Cheers.